Royal Romances. Napoleon and Josephine, Till Fate Do Us Part. Part 1. Napoleon's Rose.
Marie-Joseph Rose, or just Rose to family and friends, read the letter from her husband and burst into tears. In it, Viscount Alexander de Beauharnais, to whom she had been married for 4 years, accused her of infidelity and claimed that Hortense, their second child born 2 weeks premature, was not his daughter. Alexander called Rose, quote, the vilest of creatures who was beneath all the sluts in the world. Then he ordered her to enter a convent. Rose could not believe this was happening to her. She arrived in Paris at the age of 16 to marry Alexander and had always been faithful to him. Alexander, on the other hand, was embarrassed by his poorly educated, unsophisticated wife, a plump little bumpkin who came from the remote island of Martinique. Handsome, suave, and an intellectual snob, he wanted to tutor her so that she could participate in salon conversations about literature and art, but Rose showed no interest in studies. Alexander felt that he had no choice but to leave her at home, while he spent most of his time with refined Parisian ladies, many of whom were his mistresses. Having been accused of adultery by her cheating husband, Rose could not help but remember what a fortune teller predicted before she left Martinique. You will have an unhappy marriage, and then you will wed a dark man of little fortune. He will cover the world in glory and make you a queen, and greater than a queen. Rose had no idea what greater than a queen meant. The fortune teller had no idea that this dark man would be Napoleon Bonaparte, and that once Rose met him, she would become known to the world as Josephine. But let's go back to 1783, when Rose, unjustly vilified and abandoned by her husband, was facing a dilemma. Should she go back to Martinique and live a life of obscurity at her parents' failing sugar plantation? If that perspective was not bleak enough, Rose would also have to leave her son Eugene behind with his father. She chose, wisely we should say, to follow Alexander's orders and move into a convent. Now let's be clear. Alexander did not expect Rose to become a nun. He simply wanted her out of the house so that he could live there with his mistress. In those days, convents were a haven for women in distress like Rose. She could not have chosen better when deciding on one. The lodgers there lived side by side with the nuns, but their lives were far from holy. The women wore beautiful dresses, attended balls, concerts, and fully enjoyed their usual social lives. Rose flourished in the company of these sophisticated ladies. She learned the art of graceful movement and pleasant conversation. She brought her voice down to a husky, sexy timbre and mastered the enigmatic smile of Mona Lisa. Just a slight upward curve of the lips. Rose had a good reason not to open her mouth. All that remained of her teeth were ugly black stubs. That's what happens, dear friends, when you chew on too much sugar cane when growing up. While in the convent, Rose tried to clear her name of Alexander's ugly accusations. The court was sympathetic to her plight and started a legal separation on her behalf. Once it was finished, Rose left the convent a new person. She had shed pounds. She learned to use makeup, lots and lots of it, especially rouge, so popular among French women. She developed a regal posture and added a sway to her hips, which made her gait very seductive. In short, Rose acquired qualities that men found irresistible. Today, we'd say she developed great sex appeal. Being separated from her husband, Rose could not remarry and had to rely on her charms to survive. She began to have affairs with older married men who gave her money and expensive gifts. Rose also continued to develop friendships with aristocratic ladies and through them was able to get closer to the royal court. Networking was just as important 200 years ago as it is today. Unfortunately, Rose's timing to associate with the royals could not have been worse. 4 years later, just when she was gaining status in high society, France was rocked by a revolution. King Louis XVI and Queen Marie Antoinette were guillotined. Sadly, that did not quench the rebels' thirst for blood. After all, the motto of the French Revolution was not liberty, equality, and fraternity. Oh no, the full slogan of the revolution was liberty, equality, fraternity, and death. The reign of terror followed. Unhappy servants, jealous neighbors, rivaling family members called anyone who angered them enemy of the revolution and reported them. Alexander and Rose were also arrested and placed in the horrible Carmes prison. The place was infested with rats and lice. Prisoners had a bucket for their bathroom needs, and the horrible stench of human waste permeated every corner of the building. Perhaps in order to escape this ghastly reality, some prisoners found solace in romantic liaisons. Alexander had recanted his accusations against his wife, but they never reunited as a couple. In prison, he fell in love with one of Rose's cellmates, and Rose herself began an affair with a handsome 27-year-old General Oche, who was a VIP, very important prisoner, and had a cell all to himself. This was 18th century France, my friends. Inmates drank half a bottle of wine with their meals. For a bribe, they could sneak into each other's cells for some hanky-panky, but without a judge or a jury, sooner or later, all of them were guillotined. Many women engaged in affairs in hopes of getting pregnant. If that happened, they would be released from prison. Rose did not conceive, and she desperately missed her children. She found a way to communicate with them through her dog, a pug named Fortune. When the nanny brought the siblings to the prison garden fence so that they could catch a glimpse of their mother, Fortune made his way past the guards and the rats until he found his mistress. Rose would remove the note hidden inside the dog's collar and slip one for her children. After Alexander was guillotined, Rose wrote them a letter extolling their father's virtues. It was not in her nature to hold on to grudges, and being a kind and gentle soul, she wanted them to have good memories of both their parents. Shortly after her husband's execution, the jailers came to take away Rose's humble bed. One of her cellmates, a duchess, wanted to know if they would bring her a better one. The guards just laughed. Rose was to have a date with the guillotine. Why would a headless woman need a bed? Rose could not understand why her cellmates were in tears. She was not going to die. She was going to become a queen, and greater than a queen. Her friends were stunned. How could Rose believe in silly predictions and in the tarot cards that she kept reading day after day? "Have you started assembling your court?" the Duchess asked her. "Oh, no, I haven't thought of it. Perhaps you can be my lady-in-waiting," Rose replied. It was obvious that the poor woman had lost her mind. But what does fate care about people's logic? That very day, it was not Rose but Robespierre, the father of the Reign of Terror, who was guillotined to the loud cheers of the crowd. The era of tyranny was over. After more than 3 months in prison, Rose was free. She was now a 30-year-old widow with shattered health and 2 young children. All her possessions had been seized by the state, and she began to borrow money left and right to survive. Luckily, her lover, General Hoche, was also released. Rose hoped he would leave his 16-year-old wife and marry her. Had her wish come true, we would have never heard of Josephine. But fate had already been hard at work to make sure that would not happen. Hoche had no intention of marrying Rose, though he was eager to continue their affair and to give her money. In the end, with her grace and gentle manners, Rose reeled in a fish much bigger than General Hoche. Her new paramour was former Viscount Paul Barras. The revolution had abolished titles, and everyone in the French Republic was addressed as citizen. Citizen Barras was the key figure in the new French government known as the Directory. Barras paid off Rose's astounding debts. The woman had proved to be a compulsive shopper. He rented her a nice home, provided Rose with a carriage, and sent her son Eugene to an elite military academy. During that time, as if to make up for all the horrors, Parisians threw themselves into extreme merrymaking. At balls, guests wore red ribbons around their necks to symbolize the victims of the guillotine. Extravagant dinner parties often turned into orgies. Salon gatherings offered lively conversations with foreign ambassadors, writers, and generals. Widow Rose de Beauharnais belonged to the group of the most fashionable ladies who attended those exquisite affairs. They were known as the Marvelous. What was in fashion after the Revolution? Gone were the stiff corsets and the hoop skirts of Marie Antoinette. Gone were the poof hairstyles, which could reach 4 feet in height and took hours, if not days, to assemble. The Marvelous wore their hair down and preferred dresses of flowing, transparent fabrics. On occasion, they appeared in public with their bosoms fully exposed. All these chic women had powerful husbands or lovers, often both, and behind Rose stood the most important man of the French Republic, Paul Barras. Rose was the most gracious hostess. Yet Barras, who loved luxury and power so much he was called King Barras behind his back, soon found a younger replacement for the aging and very, very expensive Rose. But how to get rid of her when she was so sweet and clingy? Barras, a conniving and astute politician, knew exactly what to do. On the one hand, he had a 32-year-old high-maintenance mistress, and on the other, his military protégé, the Corsican-born 26-year-old General Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon was 9 when his parents sent him to an elite military academy in France. At 14, his talent for math made him an excellent choice for the prestigious Royal Military School in Paris. Napoleon was only 24 when, by pure chance, he was ordered to replace the dead artillery battery commander in the battle at the port of Toulon. While the generals bickered about how to free this impenetrable fortress from royalists and the British fleet, Captain Bonaparte came up with a brilliant plan and personally led his column into attack. He was wounded in the thigh. His horse was shot from under him, but this fearless Corsican captain was unstoppable. He did not hide from bullets and cannon fire. Napoleon believed in his star. He knew that fate had something special in store for him. He was certain it was not yet his time to die. As a result of Napoleon's remarkable strategy, the English fleet had to retreat and the French harbor was secured. The commanding general noted that Bonaparte was a rare officer and then added, "Reward this young man and promote him, for if he is ungratefully treated, he will promote himself." The Minister of War took this warning seriously. In a couple of days, Captain Bonaparte became Brigadier General Bonaparte. Toulon was his first step on the path to glory. Unfortunately, when not in battle, this talented general was the epitome of awkwardness. Skinny, with long scraggly hair and dirty nails, Napoleon did not believe in spending money on gloves. He looked like a lanky teenager and stood out like a sore thumb among the over-eau-de-cologned, over-groomed, and overdressed French men. He was extremely well-read and well-versed, but had absolutely no knack for small talk. At social events, where discussions centered around philosophy and art, he talked to French ladies about military strategy, or, much worse, inquired if they nursed their children. It was no wonder these refined women fled upon seeing him. Napoleon was not happy about his lack of status in high society. The young general had been eager to find a bride, preferably a wealthy one, not because he was avaricious, not at all, but because he was already supporting his widowed mother, Letizia, and his 7 siblings. Joseph was the oldest of the Bonaparte children, but it was Napoleon, the second-born, who, after their father's death, often went hungry but made sure his family was fed. Napoleon proposed to some older women. To his chagrin, they all rebuffed him. Joseph soon married Julie Clary, a daughter of a wealthy merchant. Napoleon became engaged to Julie's younger sister, Desiree. Well, Desiree's parents were convinced that one Bonaparte per family was more than enough. The brothers had no titles, no connections, and no money. If only they knew that one day the scruffy, penniless Napoleon would put both their daughters on thrones, and that Desiree would start a royal Swedish dynasty that rules today. But let's go back to the end of the 18th century when Napoleon was still courting Desiree. The couple met seldom and conducted their relationship mostly through letters. In today's world, they'd probably be texting. How serious is that? It would be safe to say that their romance was going nowhere. Napoleon was floundering all alone in high Parisian society when he was suddenly noticed by no one else but the Queen of the Marvelous, Widow Rose de Beauharnais. How and why did this happen? There is a family legend about how Napoleon and Rose met. After crushing royalist riots in Paris, General Bonaparte was put in charge of confiscating civilian weaponry. Eugene, Rose's 14-year-old son, came to Napoleon's headquarters to ask if he could keep his late father's sword. The general was touched and granted the boy's plea. The next day, Rose came to thank Napoleon for his kindness. And the rest, as they say, is history. The legend is enticing, but in a less romantic and more pragmatic approach, fate had designated Barras to be the master of Napoleon and Rose's destiny. A social function like a ball or a salon gathering would have given Barras a perfect opportunity to dump his aging mistress. Bonaparte needed to be polished, and Barras asked Rose to take him under her wing and perhaps under her bed covers. To ensure that his plan worked, he convinced Napoleon that in order to rise in Parisian society, he needed the guidance and the companionship of a well-connected and popular woman like Rose. Bonaparte could not believe his luck. This lady, who in his eyes was nothing short of a goddess, listened patiently as he prattled on about his military achievements. She was also not put off, or at least pretended not to be put off, by his shabby uniform, greasy hair, and unkempt hands. Bonaparte could not take his gaze off that sweet, enigmatic, seductive smile of hers. And then she invited him to her boudoir. Napoleon knew virtually nothing about lovemaking unless we count his unremarkable tryst with a young prostitute. Rose, on the other hand, took him to the pinnacle of sensual love, and each moment of this divine experience was reflected in numerous mirrors that covered the walls of her room. Bonaparte never forgot that night and would later recall her, quote, zigzags. I do not dare elaborate, dear friends, and will leave the meaning of this word to your imagination. Napoleon's world had been turned upside down. He had been cynical about deep feelings, and all of a sudden he was madly, deliriously in love. He could not call his beloved Rose. Rose was for everyone else. He invented his own name for her, Josephine. And to his Josephine he wrote at 7 o'clock the next morning, I wake up filled with you. Your image and the intoxicating pleasures of last night allow my senses no rest. Sweet and incomparable Josephine, what strange power you have over my heart. I shall see you again in 3 hours. Till then, 1,000 kisses, mia dolce amore. But give me back none, for they set my blood on fire.
Dear friends, this is Elena Pavlova, the author and producer of Royal Romances. Thank you for watching and listening. If you enjoyed this show, please give it great reviews, share it with others, and post about it on social media. Subscribe to learn about upcoming episodes, and listen to the Royal Romances podcast on all platforms. You can also visit www.royalromances.com for more stories and pictures. I look forward to hearing from you. Be well.